from now would show that some of these heresies that was in the beginning is actually resurfacing in another dimension. So like I said in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9, the things which has been is the one which will be, and there is nothing new under the sun.
Okay, Alan Benner, kindly give us your opening statement.
God bless you. The viewers out there, I greet all of you tonight, and I pray that the grace of God will envelop you wherever you are. Now, basically, this even has become a topic for discussion because throughout the beginning of the Church of Christ, people have had an imbalanced view about who God is. So we've taught the church, when I say we are talking about preachers or the teachers of the word have taught God in a certain light for a long time, to the extent that our minds cannot conceive that God would also be a God of justice, and that God would also be a God who also corrects wrongs. So this discussion has become very necessary because there are people who think that the grace of God means that we can decide to do whatever we want to do, and that there's no need for good conduct or whatever, because God is so merciful, so loving and all that. So I want it to put it across that the discussion is going to be a very balanced discussion. We are going to look at the nature of God. We are going to look at the attributes of God. We are going to look at the grace of God in perspective to see whether God killed, whether God has wrath or whatever. The discussion as we go on further will let us know from the scriptural perspective what the answers really are. So we are not going to guesswork anything. We are not going to just speak out of our own eloquence or own opinion. The word of God is going to be our guide tonight. God bless you.
All right, Isaac Patrick, kindly give us your opening statement and we can zoom in.
Yeah, thank you. So good evening to everyone. I've been looking forward to this program actually, and I'm excited to be here. You know, it's important for all of us to know that irrespective of what you think God is, or irrespective of your perception about who God is, it does not really change anything about him, because he is who he is irrespective of what your thoughts or your concepts about him is. However, it is very, very also important that you get your concepts and your perceptions about God accurate, because how much you can receive from God largely depends on your concepts and your perceptions about him. And so what it means is that your heart attitude, your mindset, how you perceive God to be, you know, and this is what actually separates how much one believer is able to receive from God and how that another believer is also not able to receive from God. It has all got to do with your mindset about who God is, your attitude, or what, when you think about God, what comes to your mind? How do you perceive him in all other aspects of your life? And so this discussion we're going to have is important, because at the end of the day, we are trying to share together to help you and to also help ourselves to build sort of a right perspective about how we see God in the midst of several chaos that have happened before. And I trust that really is going to be a blessing to us all. Thank you.
All right, so we just heard the opening statements of our guest. We want to go straight to the point. We are not beating around the bush. We want to go straight to the point into our subject under discussion. Now, we are looking at about almost 9 major questions in this forum. Hopefully, we are trusting God to continue tomorrow. If definitely we may not be able to digest everything here, but we are going straight to the first question. Now, Alan Benner is going to take care of the first question. Then we're going to continue or follow up with him. Now, Alan Benner, does God kill? Did he kill or destroy people in the Old Testament? If he did, can we call God killing evil? Or does killing make God evil or a murderer? Now let me take it again for purpose of viewers' sake. Does God kill? Did God kill or destroy people in the Old Testament? If he did, can we call God killing evil? Does killing make God evil or a murderer?
Wonderful.
All right.
God bless you for this wonderful question. Yeah, this particular question has become a bone of contention in Christendom, and we need to lay the facts bare and bring clarity to this particular thing. Man of God, I believe that the basic reason why there is one extreme, in fact, there's one extreme that presents God in a certain light, makes God to be so wicked, and there's another extreme that believes that God is so loving that he cannot do anything that we human beings perceive to be evil. So now the basic thing is that in Exodus chapter 20 verse number 13, when God gave the 10 commandments to Moses to be given to the children of Israel, because at that time in Exodus chapter 19, God told Moses that I want to cut a covenant with the nation of Israel. And in fact, when you read Exodus 19, it's so interesting that the children of Israel did not even wait for Moses to come and bring the conditions of that covenant. They just told Moses that tell God that whatever he tells us we will do. So in Exodus chapter 20, God began giving them what we call theologically as the Decalogue. That's the 10 commandments. And in the 6th commandment, he said that thou shalt not kill. Now, the problem here is how the construction was made in the English translation. In the original Hebrew, which is the language that was used to write the Old Testament, the actual reading is supposed to be that thou shalt not murder, because the Hebrew word that has been translated in especially some of the English versions, especially the King James version, the word is ratsak. Now ratsak means it's supposed to be recorded as murder, because killing and murder are not the same. It's actually supposed to read this way: thou shalt not murder. Murder is a premeditated, unlawful taking of a life, whereas killing is generally the taking of a life. So for instance, if I go and purchase, let me just bring it so basic. If Apostle Carl here goes to purchase maybe a goat, and he kills the goat, you see here he's taking the life of the goat. In that context, he would not be seen as someone who is violently taking the life of the goat. But assuming he saw the goat walking somewhere and he used probably his car to hit the goat, you realize that eyebrows will be raised against him, that why did you kill the goat? You see that? So in that context, let's say he has murdered the goat. In the same way, God is seen here based on our English translation, that because he said thou shalt not kill, he was giving the commandment to the Israelites that they should not kill. So people cannot just fathom the fact that how can the same God give instructions to the same Israelites and some people in the scriptures to go and kill, because there is a misunderstanding and there's a misrepresentation of how Exodus chapter 20 verse 13 is supposed to read. It's supposed to read, thou shalt not commit murder. So in the Bible in basic English, it puts it very powerfully this way. It says, do not put anyone to death without cause. So what we are learning basically from this point is that thou shalt not kill, because that's what we have been taught, gives a certain impression that how can God give the same instruction that you shouldn't kill and yet he himself killed. I want to put it across simply and on point, concisely, that God killed in the Old Testament, but God did not murder. There's a difference between murder and killing, and you realize that when God takes a life, he takes the life justifiably. So as we continue with the discourse, we are going to see that when God kills, it does not represent evil, because there are certain times that some things must be killed and some people must be killed. That's how come God has given the power to nations. For example, every nation on earth has the military. The military sometimes kills, but it doesn't make them murderers. So as we go further in our discourse, we are going to prove from the word of God, and even in the New Testament, because there are people who think that God is so loving to the extent that he tolerated so much nonsense. God is so docile, he doesn't really punish sin, and that as for God, he's so caring, he's so cool. If God is that caring, so cool, doesn't punish wrong, and he has left his children to mess up, we are going to prove from the scriptures that the picture that has been painted by some preachers is a wrong picture of the God of grace. God bless you.
All right, Pastor Boache, please make your presentation.
All right, thank you. I think the submission made by Doc is excellent. What I would like to add is this. You know, from time immemorial, the one thing that most people would not argue about so far as God is concerned is the fact that he is a God of love. And so no matter what it takes, you could argue about so many things, but when it comes to the fact that he is love, everyone, most people would like to agree to the fact that indeed God is love. Now, so what people try to do is that they expect that this God who is love is supposed to survive the test of time. What I mean by the test of time is that we are looking at right from creation, in the Garden of Eden, after the Garden of Eden, before the law, you know, whilst the law was going on. They do expect that this God of love should be able to maintain this attribute right from the Garden of Eden through into, you know, when indeed he gave the law, the 10 commandments and all that. Now, however, one thing that I think most people do not consider is this. You see, people see God as, let's say, so this is God. And then we have God on the one hand, we have the world on the other hand. And we perceive that this is a world that is ongoing. People are like getting married, people are doing all things they are doing. It's a normal world, people are doing all that they have to do. And that we perceive a God on the other hand who is a God of love, for which reason he's supposed to be a God of love irrespective of what is going on in the world. And so whatever is going on in the world, you be a God of love. That is what we expect you to do. But if you have that perception about all that happened, you realize that this is not so. Why? Because he is a God of love, but he's also a God who is with us. He's not a God of love who is loving us from a distance. He's a God of love who loves us by becoming part of us. Creation, he was with us. Right when Adam sinned, he was with them. In fact, he driving them out of the Garden of Eden. If you study the scriptures, you realize that indeed, if they had continued to eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good, the fruit of life, they would never have died. Now, some people might perceive this to be, you know, if man wouldn't die, I think that would be good. But actually, that would have been terrible. Can you imagine someone who is suffering from, let's say, a coma or blindness or severe poverty or is having several heart issues, and yet the person cannot die? The person remains immortal, and his immortality, he's still you know, in that state, in that predicament, and there couldn't be any change. He can't be better, but then he cannot also die. You know, and so people begin to develop all these ideas that, okay, then that's how it's supposed to be. So God's action to drive them out of the garden was actually for their protection. And remember, you see, when Cain did the first murdering, and then the Bible says that God called out to him, Cain. What did Cain do? He was able to respond. How did he know it was God speaking? Why wasn't he surprised? How was he able to discern that, okay, this is God speaking? Could it be that post the Garden of Eden, God was still interacting with man? God was still in fellowship with man. God was still teaching him. How did they know about sacrifice? How did they know about, okay, let me burn a lamb. If I catch a goat or a sheep, I should kill it like this. I should do this. How did they know about that? How did Cain know that what he did was not pleasing to God? Could it be that it was not as if God was running away from man, but rather God had an original plan for man, but man came in the way, man distorted the plan. So, and yet still, though man distorted the plan, God still had to do the chasing. So now he has to do the chasing. He now has to find ways to still get man to understand him, God, the way he is. Now, so specifically to answer that question, I'm sure there are other questions that we will tackle. So did God really kill in the Old Testament? Yes, God killed in the Old Testament. And you've got to understand this. You see, how would you feel if, let's say, you came to church someday and someone stole your phone or someone took your money? Okay. Now, apart from the pain, you will also be surprised that, how come I'm in church? These things are not supposed to happen in church. What it means is that, in other words, you are expecting that righteousness should be a normal thing in the church. But what you also haven't thought of is, you see, this is God, okay, traveling through the length of time with people, with mankind who will not always be doing what he expects him to do, and yet God is also wanting to establish righteousness and holiness. In fact, not to make it complicated, who also wants to establish right living, because of course you wouldn't want to live in a society that is full of chaos. That is why when you are sleeping, you lock your rooms. That is why when you are moving about, you want to protect yourself. Okay, so this is a God trying to establish all of these things. So I think I wouldn't want to go ahead of myself, so I'll pause. I think with the other issues, I'll come in. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would say that this is not a very simple topic at all, because when you do a bit of research, you find out that a lot of people have raised concerns, especially Christians, have raised concerns about this particular killings and what has come to be known as the atrocities of God in the Old Testament. So somebody feels that God actually committed atrocities in the Old Testament. I want to a bit zero in on this in from a certain dimension. After September 11th happened, people began to question a lot of things.
What's the challenge? What's happening? So what do we do? We are starting again. Can't delete this one.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave this course.
So some nice submissions have been made. We can't.
So what do we do? Communicate with me. Are we restarting?
So you should.
All right, so I was saying that this is not a very simple subject to start with, and it's very dicey and very some way to find out that, and I said that in the Old Testament there have been some killings that has come to be known as the atrocities of God, because people think that God actually committed some atrocities in the Old Testament. And I was saying in connection that after September 11th happened, there were people, or there came a phase of a group of people called the new atheists, and specifically the names are Dan Dennett, a guy called Christopher Hitchens, and then I think Sam Harris, and then Richard Dawkins of Oxford. And these new atheists actually have just one major thing. They said that it can happen, all what people are going through in this world is actually because they have entrusted their lives into a particular God. And so they were actually against religion, but a bit of probing into what these people stand for, and some of the books they wrote around that time will show that they were not against any religious activities, but actually the God of the Bible, the God of the Jews and the God of the Christians. And some of them have written books, the God Delusion, and some other books I cannot mention now from off head. And some of the things they said in these books is that the Christian God is actually guilty of some killings in the Old Testament. Now, let's leave there a bit. In Genesis chapter 22, we find out that God tells Abraham to actually go and sacrifice his son, who is what? Isaac, and all that. And we can look, the reason why we have come to actually discuss some of these things is because we've discussed some